be able to eat eggs one day and not eat eggs another. And again, it has to do with this histamine bucket and what else is at play. And that's another reason why it's very hard to figure out what you're triggered by, because you may do fine with a food one day and not do fine with food another. And that's going to depend on a confluence of factors, you know. So what are the largest sources of histamine in the diet? There are high histamine foods that contain biogenic amines that produce histamine. Fermented foods, deli meats, shellfish, fish that is not flash frozen or gutted on the boat. I would recommend getting to know your fishmonger, getting to know who supplies your fish, and just talking to them and getting sources of fish that are flash frozen or gutted on the boat. Because really, if you get fish like that, you can eat it. But if it sits out on the counter too long, if it defrosts too long, it's really best to defrost quickly and cook quickly your fish. Carry it home in ice from the grocery store. All those things matter because the longer meat or fish sits at room temperature, the more bacteria they grow, and bacteria produce histamine. Alcohol, vinegar, yeast, condiments, chocolate, unfortunately cheese, overripe foods, leftovers, these are all high histamine foods. Then there are foods that are histamine liberators, and again, I would say the far left are the most troubling foods. This middle column, those I would say are foods that people can sometimes be okay with, depending on how far along they are in the spectrum. Then there are diamine oxidase inhibitors. Diamine oxidase is an enzyme that metabolizes histamine, black tea, green tea, alcohol, and many medications. Antibiotics, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, antiarrhythmics. You see a lot of people on antihypertensive drugs have chronic hives. It's a histamine intolerance to their food because they're not able to metabolize histamine. So I would say people that have a histamine intolerance who don't have MCAS, it's probably due to a heart condition. The other thing that reduces diamine oxidase is loss of the enteric coating of the gut. So your gut is a thin epithelium layer of single cells, and if your gut epithelium is challenged at all or degraded at all, then you're not going to produce as much DAO, and you're going to have a hard time metabolizing histamine. This is where the gut health is so helpful. So what can you eat? What I would say is that people that would have the hardest time really are vegans and vegetarians, because meat and fish are a staple now. Again, if you're more on the milder to moderate of the spectrum, then you're going to be able to do beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. And of nuts and seeds, walnuts and pecans are more troublesome than hemp or sunflowers. So it's on the spectrum. But it is a very whole foods diet. It's fish, meat, fresh frozen veggies, fruits, healthy fats, some non-dairy milks, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds. I do have some tricks for some of those foods that are troublesome. I do replace chocolate with carob. So I have a homemade fudge recipe I give people where they can make their own fudge with carob instead of chocolate. Salads are troublesome because you can't do vinegar, so I have people do palm juice or cranberry juice instead of vinegar, mixed with olive oil. If you can't do lemon, you could substitute with citric acid. So you can get some citric acid and do a quarter teaspoon for 1 tablespoon of lemon in a recipe. If you can't do eggs, there's a flaxseed replacer for eggs where you can do a tablespoon of flax in water, and it basically acts like an egg replacer in baked goods. So there are tricks to replacing some of these foods. On the next slide, I have some of my favorite resources. The low histamine chef is great. She has a lot of great recipes. She does use avocado and citrus, which are moderately histaminic foods. So again, you just have to kind of comb the recipes a little bit. And if you were having trouble with lemon, you could use the citric acid. Janeka Bickerstaff has a food list. I would say it's a limited. It doesn't have a lot on the food list, so it doesn't answer all your questions about food. The Swiss Interest Group for Histamine Intolerance, SIGI, they actually created their list based on surveying people and seeing what people were reacting to, so that's another perspective. Alison Vickery is another great resource. She's a health coach from Australia, and she actually created a food list that compiles from multiple other food lists. And she does divide between high, moderate, very high, high, moderate, low, which is helpful because if you're coming up with a food elimination diet for yourself, you could just eliminate high and very high to start off with. And then there is a histamine intolerance app as well. Okay, so that's all about the diet. Let's move on to, well, let's talk about improving histamine clearance. Here's another crazy slide with lots of images. But the basic thing I want to say about this is that there are two enzymes in the body that metabolize histamine, HNMT and DAO. DAO is mostly found in the gut. So, and it's found in the extracellular part of the body. HNMT works intracellularly. These are all cofactors that influence the effect of these enzymes. So HNMT will not work well if people are undermethylating. You may have heard of methylation, it's a big hot topic. I would say it's very common for people with mast cell activation syndrome to have high histamine. And high homocysteine. High homocysteine is a marker for undermethylation. And that would be an indicator that that enzyme is not going to be functioning well. And that could be and so once you improve methylation, then you're going to be improving histamine clearance. Some cofactors for that enzyme would be B12, methylcobalamin, methylfolate, B9, and then SAMe. Getting your homocysteine tested would be a good test to ask for from your doctor. You can also ask for MTHFR to find out if you have that genetic mutation polymorphism. And we'll talk about some other testing you can get as well. Yeah?
You can also order the tests online independently yourself.
You can. True Health Labs, is that the one you use?
There's so many of them now.
Yeah.
I can get those.
Life Extension, MyMed Lab, True Health Labs. You can order tests independently if you are having trouble finding a doctor who will order tests for you. Yeah. DAO has other cofactors, copper, B6, vitamin C. You want to be careful with copper supplementation. Copper is one of those nutrients that you can go toxic with, so you really want to know if you have a copper deficiency before you do that. Ceruloplasmin is a blood test that will tell you if you have copper deficiency. It's a good marker. DAO also requires plenty of protein and oleic acid. Oleic acid is a fatty acid found in olive oil, avocado oil. I actually don't know if people with histamine intolerance can do avocado oil. I would think you could because it's.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, do you? Okay,
I'm okay
good.
with most histamine. I just, I don't eat the same thing. I keep doing something high and I do the rest of the day.
You rotate it?
Yeah.
Yes. That's great. Also, flax oil is a good source of oleic acid. And then we talked about factors that reduce the effect of DAO. Some people have a genetic mutation with the DAO enzyme, so they just may not produce as much DAO, and that could be a factor. Okay.
It's from the last one.
Please ask questions as we go along. I'm happy to answer questions.
So as far as methylation, and this is what I learned to start that you want to be more at like a basis of homeostasis before you would start supplementing to do that fact. They're already cycling and they're reacting
Well, I mean, if there's clear indication that somebody's undermethylating, I think it's going to help reduce the cycling as far as being in a reactive state.
And then from this, I haven't started methylation yet. Like I have my mom's protocol, but I haven't started it yet. Like, so how many weeks or so or months do you usually see? I'm an undermethylator, so basically every other day.
Yeah.
How many weeks or so do you usually see?
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry.
How long does it usually take to see difference once they start their summer methylation?
Oh, like difference in how you feel?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
usually like how long does it take for the first one usually?
It's a good question. It depends on how severe the symptoms are. I mean, because methylation really is a form of phase 2 detox. So I would say that in supporting phase 2 detox actually will help most people with MCAS.
So I have a fast phase 1 liver and
Yeah.
and a slow.
Which most people, that's usually the problem is if somebody has a paradetox.
So what can you do to like help this slow phase 2?